From teaching the art of podcasting at USC to launching Cloud 10 Media, Sim Sarna is no stranger to launching podcasts. In this episode, Nathan Spell and I were very excited to sit down and pick Sim's brain on developing compelling podcast content, how to get started, and having patience during the process. So let's get started.
That's the great thing about Stamps.com. They grow with you.
As much fun as I had, I couldn't wait to get back to my Sleep Number bed.
Yep.
I love my Third Love bras. They're hands down the most comfortable bras I've ever owned.
I love making Blue Apron. I love it. It's my me time.
Sim, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to start off by diving into your background a bit. I read that you actually teach a class at USC that centers around podcast creation.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. That's actually my favorite thing in the world to do. So it's been about 3 years now. I teach a class called Creating the Hit Podcast, and it's, like I said, third year. And honestly, I went to USC, and my favorite classes when I was a film student there were the classes where people from the industry would come in and impart their wisdom, bring in guests from the industry, and offer up internships where you actually can see them, talk to them, feel them, touch them. They're real people that are in the industry. I always wanted to do a class similar to those types of classes. So when the opportunity came about a few years ago, I took advantage of it, and it's been amazing. So every class I bring in a guest from either front of the mic or behind the mic, different genres of podcasts, and we just have a conversation. Then they actually help the guests and we help our students with their podcasts, which become their final projects. And I'm going to be spending the next few hours grading final projects because they just finished, and we have our final wrap up party tomorrow. Our semester is over, and looking forward to next year. I only teach falls, but I love it, and it's my favorite thing. I actually bring in a bunch of interns from our class, and a couple of them now have full-time jobs. So it's working out as quite as a feeder system as well for us, which is exciting.
Just out of curiosity, when they create podcasts, do they have to just do like one episode, or do they do like a series for their final project?
Well, for the final, they actually have to do a full pilot plus a full campaign artwork. They have to submit it through a host. You know, our preferred host is Simplecast. They have to learn how to pitch the project. Some of them do fake ads. Some of them are doing incredible stuff. Audio dramas with real actors. I mean, a few of them are actually carrying on their podcast. Some of my former students who have now graduated are continuing on their podcast. I know one of them, Victoria Garrick. She has probably 20,000 downloads on hers, and she's a personal development. Wow. She used to play volleyball for SC, and she's doing an incredible job. And I think Daniela still has hers, and she works for me now full time as well. Yeah, I really just love working with the university and just really ushering in a new group of podcasters. It's a lot of fun for me. I get a lot out of it.
Yeah. That's really cool. I wish that class was offered whenever I was in school. That sounds like a really cool experience for sure.
Yeah, it's been great.
I'm curious, could you maybe talk to us a bit about what made you take the leap into founding Cloud 10?
Yeah, well, it's always been my dream. I guess, going back to when I used to produce movies a long time ago, I always wanted to be a studio head of some type. Much easier to become a studio head in podcasting than it is in movies, especially since the costs are much lower. But when I co-created Anna Faris is Unqualified 5 years ago. It ended up being a very popular show. That opened up a bunch of doors for me, and I discovered that I really, truly love the process of working with talented people to create shows, and I want to continue doing that. So now our Cloud 10, our network, whatever you want to call it, our studio production company. I still don't even know what I consider ourselves. We do it all. But we have about 8 or 9 shows now, and we're launching about 5 or 6 new shows next year. And we're having a lot of fun, and we're happy because if we can make money and have fun and put out content that we are proud of, then I think we're all doing a good thing.
I was wondering if you can maybe also talk to us a bit about some of the shows that you have on Cloud 10. I know that you're working with some really awesome names. How did you transition into working with some of the talent that you're working with now?
Luckily, I've known some of the talent that I've worked, like Topher has been a friend of mine for a long time. We do a show called Minor Adventures of Topher Grace. I've met people just through working in films, the relationships that I've had, I've showed my track record with Unqualified was great for years. And that opened up a bunch of doors for me. And I met people through Unqualified as well. And then of course, I still had to win in the room. I mean, I'm up against some of the big boys and girls like iHeartRadio and Spotify and Podcast One, people that have, Cadence 13 and Midroll, all amazing companies that have money to spend, that I can offer talent some real money. So I'm always like the little guy in there. And so I have to somehow be scrappier and just show that I can somehow compete with those guys. And luckily, I'm still hanging in there. I'm in the game right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that my team, we put a lot of personal attention into every single show. We don't have any desire to become a huge network because we want to make sure that we could carefully focus on the shows that we have right now and grow those shows and nurture those shows. We have teams that work on every single episode. And that's something that's really important to me. That's something I learned from film, that, every single episode for me is it's important to respect the listener's time. My students, the first question they'll always ask me in class is, how long should my podcast be? And I always say it's whatever length you need it to be. I don't mind if your podcast is an hour and a half, as long as it's an hour and a half that's compelling, that you want to listen to. Just respect the listener's time. And that's why I'm a big advocate of editing. And I'm sitting across from my head of post-production, Josh, right now, who is one of the best editors around. And he works really hard and it takes a lot of time with it. And I think that in a lot of these talk format shows, people don't really take the time to develop and research these shows. Our head of production, Allison, who works on a couple of our bigger shows like Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson, and Sophia Bush's show, Work in Progress. She does a lot of work beforehand to research the show, to book the show, to make sure everything is perfect. And before we even get to the actual production part. And then everything in the production, all of the production has to be smooth. And then after that, when Josh takes over with our producing team for the editorial, that has to be perfect. And then of course the social media and the release efforts for every single episode have to be perfect as well. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm leaving out 100 things. There's a checklist of 100 or 200 things that we do, including the right tags to make sure that the episode is released the proper way, in our opinion. But we're not the only ones that do it. There's so many people that do it well.
It sounds like there's just so many details from start to finish that you guys put a lot of thought and care into. I'm curious, how do you think the actual production quality affects the listenership of a show?
I can tell you personally, even if it's a guest or a show I really want to hear, if I look at the story notes or the episode description, within the first couple of minutes, if the audio quality isn't great, I'm going to turn it off because there's too much other great content that actually take the time to do it properly. I feel like it doesn't take that much work to set up proper mics, to buy the proper mics, to buy the proper recording devices. It's not that expensive either. And if you do it the right way, then your editor is going to have a lot less trouble in post-production trying to clean up really bad sound. I think it's important to have a proper audio, and it's not that hard to do well. It really isn't. I think it's lazy if you can't. Honestly, you can take our mobile device, a Zoom H6, take it anywhere, and as long as you can pick the right room, it'll sound like you're in a studio. If you have the right plugins, Josh, are you nodding your head? Yes. If you have the right plugins in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever you want to use to clean up the sound. I know that I know some of our talent do their ad reads, the ad reads that you provide for us in their closets. In their walk-in closets, because that's, especially if there's some carpet on the ground, it sounds like they're in a studio.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to think about like where podcasting is now. I mean, there's so much competition out there for, listeners' attention. I agree with you. Like if I'm listening to a show and right off the bat, it sounds, poorly produced, it's a turnoff for me, Yeah,
I can't make it through.
There's too much other great content. There's too much other great content out there. So you're right. You're absolutely right.
So one of the questions that we encounter most often from new creative folks out there is, how can I get started in the podcasting space? If you had to pick your top 5 tips for launching a podcast, what would they be? For me, it's different. I mean, it's easy to launch a podcast. I think with 2 taps of a button, there are apps now where you could launch a podcast, but it's another thing to be consistent about it. And that's where people really fall short. To do it the right way, to do it every single week and not get frustrated if they don't see the downloads go up. I think pod fade is a word that's going to be in the dictionary one day, I'm sure. Even though there are 800,000
whatever registered podcasts I just read, how many of them are actually current, where they put out weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or daily content? I think that consistency is important. That's the first thing. So if you have to make a commitment to it, and then once you have that, then you just have to make sure that you focus on the content. You have to make sure the content is original and getting it out there the right way. The best way to get a podcast out there is through other podcasts. So make sure you can either guest on other podcasts, or if you have the money or can raise the money, buy mid-roll ad spots or feed drops onto other podcasts. That's a great way to promote your show, and a lot of the big networks do that very well. I mean, we do that as well. I think that's a good place to start. There are no barriers to entry. I encourage everyone to start a podcast, even if you're doing it, as a hobby, even if it's a brand extension for your job, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer. You can all have branded podcasts or niche podcasts within your sector, and you can get people can get a lot of value out of it. So that's the other tip I have, is make sure that whatever podcast you do put out there, make sure there's a lot of value in that podcast, whatever that value may be.
Well, with all the elements that you're talking about that go into creating a podcast, there's the idea, there's being consistent, and there's the sound. I mean, if you were advising a new podcaster, where would you tell them to really focus at the beginning?
Developing your voice, meaning not your actual voice, your vocal cords, but figuring out what your message is. Why are you doing this podcast? There needs to be a reason. There has to be a reason. And once you figure that out, then make sure that you develop the right show, the right content, and then make sure that there's an audience for it. There's a lot of stuff you need to figure out. There's so many meetings that I take every day with celebrities that want to start a podcast that have no idea what to do, but they think that just because Dak Shepard is making X amount of millions of dollars per year, that they can do it too. And it's not that easy. It's just because you're a celebrity, you can't just go out there and expect to print cash. It doesn't work that way. And you guys know this. There are celebrities that are popping into the space every single day. And there are shows of mine that you all have rejected as far as advertising. Again, it's not that easy. Just because you have millions of followers on Instagram, it doesn't mean that you should have a podcast. There's a lot that goes into it before you can even, start. That's how I feel.
I think that's really good advice. I think with everyone thinking about podcasts more, and, so many people deciding they want to start, the advice to really start with like why you want to start a podcast and what it's going to be about is really, really good.
Yes, and making money shouldn't be the reason. And I think that's, a lot of people think that, many people feel that based on previous success, based on the fact that podcasting is in the news as far as companies coming in and buying up production companies, that people feel like they can be ripe for an acquisition, or their show could make millions of dollars for a network that could be ripe for an acquisition. I don't know. I just feel like at this point, even though there are more dollars being poured into podcasting, I still feel like content will always be king, and you have to make the right shows with the right hosts.
Yeah, I know a lot of people go into it thinking that it's just going to be overnight. And there's a lot of work into planning your content and ensuring that it's engaging.
Oh, and here's another tip: patience. People feel that if they're not seeing results right away, that they're doing something wrong, and sometimes they just need to let the show develop. I mean, I can think of examples of shows that have finally become successful after a couple of years. If you're in the game long enough, and then people maybe will discover your content if you continue to put out good, consistent content. I wouldn't wait too long, but at a certain point, you'll know if you should leave the game.
So I'm curious, how do your hosts feel about incorporating ad reads into their episodes?
Some hosts love it. They love the fact that they have that connection with their audience. So if it's a product that they believe in, and they could speak to the product authentically, and of course, if you guys see the conversion, then everyone's happy. And I think that the brands are happy, and you guys can tell me this, when they get a real endorsement out of a host, because then it feels like they're really getting a bargain, especially considering the fact that these celebrities make tons of money through Instagram and public appearances and whatnot. But if you get big talent to really speak about a product authentically, then everyone's happy. The brands are happy, the talent is happy, and of course the listener is happy because they have a product that everyone loves. I don't really love the ads where the hosts don't really put much into it. Maybe they'll just read the copy straight, and then it just becomes completely generic. It's copy that you've heard on every other podcast that you listen to. So, and then of course, then you guys aren't happy because you don't see conversions on the performance, and then of course I have to have that conversation with the talent saying, hey, it's we need to do something different, and it's not working out. The performance numbers aren't there, and I it's a mixed bag. It really is. But I guess the key takeaway is the ad reads need to be great, because we're still in that performance based world where you need to really sell the listener on the product so you can track it with a URL or a vanity or a promo code. But when it works really well. And you guys know what shows work. Some of our shows work really, really well. And that's when the brands continue to re-up them and everyone's happy. And the other thing I wanted to say was that if the ads are read well, listeners love it, especially when they're funny. I love the Pod Save America guys. They do a great job with their reads. I'll plug one of my shows, Endless Honeymoon, with Moshe Kasher and Natasha Leggero. I think their reads are amazing, as are Missy Piles and Constance Zimmer reads on the Mother Load, their parenting show. So when you you guys have seen this, when you guys re-up on the ads and new brands are coming in, that means everything's working. And I love it when I get Twitter messages or you see Instagram messages saying how much they loved a certain ad. And I know you guys love that as well.
I have one very specific example of that has just stuck with me throughout the years. It's Risk. He sings a song. He wrote a song for Stamps.com, and I heard that at his live shows, the audience actually requests that song and they all sing it together.
Amazing. I love that. That's incredible. See, that works. I know that brands are finally becoming aware of the fact that podcast ads are working. I think that we're going to see more thoughtful ad campaigns as well, more integrated ads. There's a lot that's going to happen in 2020 and 2021.
With that in mind, I'm curious, we've talked about how important it is for ads to be authentic and, engaging. What are some ways that your hosts might inject their own brand of creativity into their ad reads?
I mean, that is dependent on the host. I feel that the host reads should be really in the voice of the host and the podcast. I don't think that it should be jarring. I feel that it should be natural. Even though Bill Simmons, when he goes to a break, he says we're going to go to a break and there's a quick flash, but it still feels like you're still listening to a continuation of the podcast when he does his ad reads. And I like how he does his. He does a combination of he reads some copy and then he does his own little editorial on his own. Then he goes back to some copy. But my favorite are the ones where there's two co-hosts, where there's two hosts and they have the back and forth. So it really depends on the style of the show and the host's voice. But it is an art form. It's hard to do well.
This has been really great. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I really thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you both so much, and please say hello to Christine and Steve and who am I missing? Marshall, Russell, and Kurt, and Jennifer, and everyone else. I just wanted to say to everyone listening that I love working with Ad Results. You guys do an amazing job, and I hope we can continue to be partners for years and years to come.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe for updates on future episodes and leave us a comment with your feedback, questions, or ideas for future segments. Be sure to join us next time as we dive into our newest series, Sound Matters, covering the importance of sound equipment and environment. If you would like more info on Ad Results Media and what we do, please visit our website at adresultsmedia.com. This podcast was written by Lindsay Boyd and Nathan Spell, with sound mixing and editing by Freddie Trejo. This podcast is an Ad Results Media production.